Wayne County Connection. I'm your host, Michael Sweigart. Wayne County Connection promotes Wayne County as a great place to work, live, and play. We do that by connecting you with individuals and agencies in our communities that are doing their part to make Wayne County a great place to work, live, and play. From the events that they host, to the programs that they support, to the areas that they enrich and enliven our lives and our communities. There are many things going on in our community. And how can you get involved? Well, one place to start is on our website, waynet.org/cc. That's the County Connections website, where you can find more information about today's guest and past guests. You can also go from there to the WayNet calendar, which has a list of information of activities that are going on in and around our communities. And every day you can click on those links and find out what's going on and how to get connected. If you're hosting an event or promoting an event, you can feel free to list it there at waynet.org/calendar. And our producer, Jane Holman, will be helpful in getting that online so that people can get connected with you and your agency. Well, today we're talking about something that affects us all. And we're happy to welcome to the program today, Kate Kotan. And she is the Community Development Coordinator for Richmond, and she's here to talk with us today about Census 2020, and this is a big deal for us. Kate, welcome to the show.
Hello, thank you so much for having me.
Great to have you. And I like to start, as I do other shows, with our brief biographical information. So for those of our viewers who may not know you, Kate, give us a little bit of background about yourself and your connection here with Wayne County.
Well, I moved to Richmond about 3 years ago, and I've been working with the city for about a year and a half. I moved around a lot, and my dad was in the military, so I'm familiar with coming and getting settled, coming and going and getting settled really quickly. So Richmond feels like home, even though I've only been here a little bit. And I've got 3 dogs, and I like to renovate my old home in my free time when I'm not at work.
Well, that's a popular thing to do here in the Richmond area, renovating old homes and restoring historic properties. So that's a great thing. Your dogs probably won't be counted on the census, and we'll talk a little bit more about that in just a minute. But you have a background in marketing and public relations that leads you to the program with the city?
I've got an interesting background. So I have worked mainly in museums. I have an MFA in bookmaking, which is like a craft-based practice. But I've also studied visual communication, which informs a lot of my work that I do here with the city. And I've worked mainly in the nonprofit sector, and this is my first government job. And I've really enjoyed the public service aspect of the work and serving a different demographic than I have previously with museums. But I have a passion for public engagement and being of service to improving communities and all that goes with that. So, yeah.
So as community development coordinator, that involves a lot of getting the community coordinated, getting them together to promote Richmond in particular, but part of Wayne County as a great place to work, live, and play. But it's a relatively new position in Richmond city government. Could you tell our viewers a little bit more about what that position is and how it affects our daily lives?
Definitely. So the position was formed about 3 years ago, and it wears a lot of hats. I like to say that the main things that the position does is problem solving and serving as a liaison. So working to solve problems internally and externally. So helping departments internally to communicate and facilitate processes to help the community get the services that they need. And then externally working with businesses and nonprofits to identify what their challenges are, maybe for growth or getting the services they need, and then working with the right partners internally to try to meet those needs. So that's part of what I do. Another big part is communication, which is kind of a subset of community development. If you think about it, in order to have really strong community development, you have to have a strong foundation in communication and built up trust. So I work on the city website and social media. So if you follow any of the city channels or go to the website, you've probably been a little bit familiar with my work, even though you may not know it's me. So.
Well, I was going to ask you about that a little bit later if we had time in the show, and I'm glad you mentioned it. So the last question I have is, how can people get connected with you in your office if they are one of the groups or individuals that you mentioned that you do work with directly?
Yeah, so I am searchable on the city website. Our website has a great search bar up at the top. So the city website is richmondindiana.gov. Pretty easy. Just think about where you are, and it's all spelled out. And there's a search bar up at the top. And if you just search my name, even if you just search Kate, our search algorithms are pretty good. You'll get a search listing, kind of just like a Google search, and then you can click from there, and you get the staff directory. There's also a staff directory at the bottom of the homepage. You can scroll all the way down. There's also a contact us page on the homepage. There's a couple different ways to get there. My position is in the Department of Infrastructure and Development. So if you go from the city government tab on the homepage, you can find me there under the department. So there's a couple of different ways to find me. But if you just search Kate, I'm pretty sure I'd come up. So I don't know if there's another Kate in the city.
And you mentioned social media, and is there a handle that they could connect with you on social media?
Yeah, so our handle for Facebook and Twitter is just Stellar Richmond, STELLAR Richmond, and we've been increasing our Twitter traffic during the COVID-19 pandemic, because it's been a really good way to get news out and connect with the other experts in the field with what's going on. So I would recommend following us on Twitter or Facebook, depending on your social media flavor of choice. And if you're not on social media, we do have our social feeds on the What's Happening page of the city website. So if you want to see what we're posting, but you don't have an account, you can do that there.
Well, that's great information about your office and your position there as Community Development Coordinator with the City of Richmond. And with that, there is some responsibility with helping coordinate the local activity for census taking for Census 2020. And I'm sure many of our viewers have seen ads or heard them on the radio or in social media or on television about Census 2020, but there may still be some questions. And maybe somebody hasn't seen it. Maybe they're new to the area, maybe they're new to the country and they don't understand what's going on. Hopefully, and if you are, thanks for watching, and hope you learn a lot about Wayne County by the program. But let's start with the census conversation. What is it and why are we doing it?
The census is so important. So first off, the most important thing to know is what we are doing right now as a country is called the decennial census. And for anybody who may be in school, if there's little ones watching, or anybody who has been a little bit since they've been in school, decennial tells you 10. So the decennial census is every 10 years. Now, the important thing to know about the census is that they're a bureau of the federal government, and they do hundreds of tests. Or not tests, I'm sorry, surveys. So another big one they do is the American Community Survey. That is every 5 years. They do so many. They have a list of all the different surveys they do. So essentially they are the data collection agency within the federal government. And the reason the decennial census, this one we're doing right now, is such a big deal is it's the only time in the country that every single person is counted. And there are three main reasons why it's important to count every person. One is, so the federal government has a big pot of money. I believe it's like $1.3 trillion. And they allocate that money based on population, right? Because if you have a town of 5 people versus a town of 50 people, you need to make sure that the money is allocated fairly. And so the census is one way to do that. If not everyone gets counted and the town with 55 people actually has 100, then that town is going to have a really hard time functioning. The other big thing is representation. So our city council boundaries and our state representative boundaries and state senate boundaries and our federal boundaries, all of those are designated based on population. So, I've moved since I've lived in Richmond. How many times have you moved, Michael?
I've only moved twice since I've lived in Richmond, but before that, for the last 30 years, I've been pretty steady. But before that, I moved around quite a bit. Had a similar.
So And so it's similar. A city can see shifts within it, right? Like a population moves around. And so if we kept the same boundaries we had in 1800, people wouldn't be fairly represented. So it's really important that we are fairly represented based on population, so that each area has the same amount of representation. And then the third reason,
nationally, I was just going to say nationally, the big deal there is right now we're coming up into an election cycle, and the House of Representatives is completely based on population. So there's been some discussion that in the next national election, we may see some representatives shift between states based on the demographic shifts that have happened. And there's a question about whether some of the key states, including Indiana, may keep or add a representative. It's kind of an interesting thing. So
that was a huge part of the conversation leading into the start of the 2020 census. In states that have a lot of representatives, like California, put a ton of funding into Complete Count because they want to hold on to all their representatives or grow the number of representatives they have. And then states that, depending on where they were in terms of gaining or losing, you saw a kind of a response to census, because that is a huge shift in power potentially at the federal level. So this year in particular, this census in particular, has a big potential to shift our federal representation. So yeah, it's a great point.
So one of the questions that I have with relating to that, I mean, you mentioned California, and there was some news over the course of the last year or two about the demographic shift out of California. There was a huge 20-year ago time frame. There was a huge shift of young people, especially to Silicon Valley, to Southern California, with the growth of the tech industry. And in this last few years, there's been a real shift out of that. And it was made remarkably apparent during the stay-at-home, work-from-home orders that everybody was under for a while, that a lot of people were able to move their physical location away from a big office in San Bernardino. And it really highlighted the fact that many people who had moved there 20 years ago as young single adults have moved away as, not middle-aged, but midlife parents and so forth. And so California in particular was like, hey, wait a minute, we're still relevant. We still have a lot of people out here.
Yeah, and I think also there was talk before the census launched about whether there would or would not be a citizenship question. And I think there's still a lot of confusion around whether that was or was not included. And it was not included. So the 2020 census does not have a citizenship question, and you do not have to be a citizen to complete the census. So the census is aimed to have a complete count of all of the people. And so if you are here and you are a non-documented person, and you have a census taker come to your home, you can and should complete the census, because we need an accurate count. And there are no ramifications, legal or otherwise, for completing the census. It is private, and the census is legally bound by data security and data privacy laws. And so it's really important for those populations who may feel threatened or not safe to complete it, to know that there are laws protecting census participation, and to encourage it, so that we as cities and governments can accurately and successfully provide services to the people in our community, which is really difficult if we don't get a complete count.
Right. And you mentioned populations that might feel at risk in some way. And I can think of a couple of populations that either might be undercounted, either because they're hard to get in touch with, or because they're afraid to participate. And so what is the census doing in order to make sure that populations, say transient or migrant individuals, you mentioned moving earlier, we are aware of transient workers, or people without a permanent residence, often called homeless people. What's being done about tracking those individuals so that we can get an accurate count?
So they have a very detailed process for counting any individuals who live in. I'm going to answer it in a couple part question, a couple part response.
That's
So they
fine.
have a detailed process for counting anyone who lives in like a group home situation or like an extended living facility or things like that. They work directly with administration to facilitate that process. So that's kind of how that population is counted, which is a little bit different, but they're still accounted for. Anyone who is transient or not address bound, there are additional kind of partnerships at the local level to kind of help with counting those populations. They will they being the census, the regional census entities, will reach out to any shelters or soup kitchens or food pantries and have events and pop-up events and facilitation. We have a couple of events coming up at some food pantries and sack lunch giveaways that are targeted to try to help facilitate any of those transient populations to provide an opportunity for them to participate in the census if they haven't already. And I know when I spoke with the census takers this past weekend, they said that there were additional kind of outreach efforts being made to work with those other agencies that support them. So it's kind of at the agency level that a lot of those efforts are made.
Okay.
If that answers your question.
I think it might a little bit. People might have more questions. And if people do have more questions about the census, where can they go to get those answered?
So the best place to go is 2020census.gov. It's more information than you want to have. If I can just tell you that. And if you were to type in, if you just have a question and Google it, know that any resource that you find, you can trust that it's legitimate if it points to a census.gov website. So if you Google something and it links you to something that's not census.gov, don't trust it. That's kind of a way that you can check the resources that you're pointing yourself to. But that website is great, and it has a lot about data security and how to get the resources you might need, as well as how to complete the actual census.
That's twice now that you have mentioned how to complete the census, and you had a third point about why we're taking it. I don't know if we'll get back to that in a minute, but there are multiple ways to be counted. Go over those. Yes. Because one of them ties in directly to what you just mentioned with people being out taking at various events.
Yeah. So this year is the first year, and it's kind of a big deal. It's the first year that the census has gone online. And if you think about what it takes to take something online, like if Michael, you're a small business owner, and you work with people and computers all day. So if you imagine those viewers out there, taking something that is as complex as counting that every person in the States and putting it on the internet and then having it be consistent and secure and all of those things, it's a big deal that they were able to roll this out. So
who are we kidding?
Sometimes it's hard
to count a class of 30 second graders.
It's kind of remarkable when you really think about it. So yeah. It was decades in the planning, the documentation on their research and their all that went into it is really remarkable. So you can complete it online. You go to 2020census.gov and it's like right there, button. It takes about 5 minutes. It's very simple. They have it in multiple languages if your preferred language is not English. You can also complete it on the phone. So they have it in like 50 languages or something like that. And you can call in and complete it over the phone in lots of languages. And you can wait for a census taker to come to your house. So if you have not completed your census, a census taker will come to your house. They will knock on your door and they will say, hey, we haven't heard from you and you matter. We would like you to count. They will come to your house. If you want to avoid that, and you don't want to have somebody kind of invade your space or come to your house, we have this other option called these mobile questionnaire units. And we have a number of events coming up across the city, and they are opportunities where trained census employees, so they're not city employees, they're not county employees, these are trained census professionals. They come out and they have their little tablet and they will help you complete your census. And it's on your terms and it's when you want to do it. And we just had one this past weekend at Glenn Miller with the movie, and it was really great. We had a number of people complete their census, and we gave away popcorn, and it was really fun. And we have one coming up on September 2nd at the City building. So you can come. We're going to have popcorn again. You can come from 10:30 to 1 and get your census completed. If you need any other city services, you can pick up your bus pass that day for the month, or get a city permit or whatever you might need, and get yourself counted. So these are great. There's a bunch more dates, but you can get yourself counted, which is really important.
And we will have those dates listed. You just saw a graphic up on screen. Hopefully that came up okay. And then you can also link to those from the city website. They'll be listed there. And we'll get a link to those on waynet.org/cc, our page as well, for you to get connected. So there are a lot of ways for you to get connected. You mentioned a moment ago, and I don't have a lot of time left in the program here, but you mentioned the census takers. And earlier this year, they were asking for people to volunteer or to sign up for those jobs. Are those jobs still available here in Wayne County? Is there a way to get connected to that?
Yeah, surprisingly they are. I mean, I don't, I guess I should mention that they moved the end of the census deadline up by a month. So we only have until September 30th to get everyone counted. So it's a big deal that we have a month less, but they are still hiring, surprisingly. So the jobs pay amazingly well. It's $18.50 plus a night weekend differential and mileage. And you're doing really meaningful work that makes a difference in the community. So if you're interested in finding out about those jobs, there's lots of information on their website about how to apply.
Okay. Now, one last question that I had, you mentioned this kind of in passing earlier, but I want to ask the question directly, and that is, how can I know that I've been counted?
So the best way to know is if you completed it.
Well, obviously, that's a good start. What if somebody, maybe, I'm curious, somebody has my same name, you know, how do I know that they didn't get counted in my place? Is there a way that I can check that with the census?
So everyone back in March got a mailer, and that mailer had a unique ID on it. And if you have lost that mailer, say you have a super busy life and COVID has hit you hard and you lost it, or you're just like me and you don't open your mail, say you lost it, you can still complete the census. You don't have to have that ID number. Like, that's not like the thing that's tying you to completing it. But if you use that ID number, I believe that is a tracking number for you to be able to follow up. But there's not a way for you to go into the database and confirm that you have completed it. It's based on address, and it's because it's where you were living as of April 1st. And so no one else, you're counting all of the individuals in your house. So whoever completes your census entry is completing it for everyone in the household. So once a household entry has been submitted, they won't take another household entry. You can't, no one else will be able to submit that address after you. So it's not based on name.
But it's based on address. And so you mentioned earlier people moved, and some people have moved during this time. If I have moved, how do I assure that I use the correct address? Is that part of the questionnaire process?
It is, yeah. And I think a lot of people who've moved around census time, or if you've had a baby around census time, it can be confusing around who to count and when to count. So it's really clear on the website. It goes as of April 1st. Where were you living and who was living in your house? So say you have a niece living with you, but then she moves, which is that happens, but it's as of April 1st, who, if Samantha was living with you on April 1st, then Samantha counts at your house as of April 1st. So it's as of that date, not June, not February.
All right. Well, Kate, you've given a lot of great information, and I really appreciate it. I'm glad that we were able to get in some of the information about your role as the Community Development Coordinator early in the program, because now we're out of time. Thanks for coming. Kate Kotan is the Community Development Coordinator for Richmond City, and she's been talking with us about the Census 2020 and what's going on with that here in Wayne County, and know that it does directly affect us. Kate, again, I appreciate you coming on the program today. Thank you for your time.
Thank you so much for having me.
All right. And thank you for watching, everyone. We are so glad that you were able to watch another episode of Wayne County Connection and learn a little bit about what's going on here to promote Wayne County as a great place to work, live, and play. We encourage you to follow up with Kate or with waynet.org/cc to learn more about what's going on, about what this program is, and about how you can do your part to make Wayne County a great place to work, live, and play. On behalf of our producer, Jane Holman, the Wayne County Commissioners, and myself, your host, Michael Sweigart, thanks for watching. We'll see you next month.
What is the 2020 census? Every 10 years, the census records everyone living in this country. It's written in the Constitution and comes in a questionnaire that counts everyone who lives at your address on April 1st. The data can be used to inform funding for services like fire stations, schools, clinics, and representation that affect your community. Shape your future. Start here. Visit 2020census.gov.
How do I take the 2020 census? In March 2020, every address in the country will receive an invitation to complete a simple questionnaire. And there are 3 ways to respond. Number 1, do it online. Number 2, call by phone. Number 3, send it by mail. For those who don't respond, a census taker from your community will follow up and assist you. Shape your future. Start here. Visit 2020census.gov.